Hey everyone, welcome to the Latent Space podcast. This is Alessio, partner and CTO at Decibel, and I'm joined by my co-host Swix, founder of Small AI.
Hello. This is another lightning pod. We're in the remote studio with David Kirkos over in Denver. Is that right?
We're based in Boulder. Yeah.
Boulder. I'm sorry. They're, close enough.
Close enough.
Close enough. So you're the founder, CEO of Quadratic. I have been lucky enough to see you for a little bit as an angel in the journey. It seems like you've really blown up. Like I invested before you were an AI spreadsheet, but now everyone is AI. But I had a really good experience recently because I had a lot of data munging to do. We have 3,000 people at our events and everyone needs like some kind of data on our attendees. So I just threw it in Quadratic and then I, typed some English and it did some data analysis and produced some charts for me. And that was really magical to see. Well, welcome. Is that a good characterization, AI spreadsheet, or how do you talk about Quadratic?
Yeah, that's exactly how we characterize it today. And when you first joined as an angel investor, we were much more focused on building a technical spreadsheet. So we were focused on building the next generation spreadsheet. So it speaks Python.
That's all I needed.
Yeah. Speaks database connections, speaks Python, speaks those languages natively. And so our early adopters were all more technical. And now with AI, that just bridges the gap. Everyone's able to write that code and do that more technical analysis.
Yeah, I find like the people who had done the work pre-LLMs are suddenly enabled to do more. So I think this is a very similar story to StackBlitz and Bolt. StackBlitz worked on WebAssembly containers for 4 years. And they were making some progress, but like nothing as compared to Bolt, which did the unlock. But like right now they can capitalize and just work on the agents because they already did the web container stuff. And it's I think it's similar to you. Like you can work on AI spreadsheet because you already spent the last 4 years doing the WebAssembly stuff.
Yeah, we were focused for 3 years on building the high performance spreadsheet that speaks code natively as a next generation spreadsheet experience. And one of our biggest challenges was educating new users on how to use the product. And AI completely makes that go away. I'm sure it's a similar thing for Bolt and StackBlitz, where, educating users on how to best use a technical product is difficult. And when you can have users sign up and just prompt it, just drop some data in and say, help me analyze this, help me visualize it, the learning curve went to zero and the adoption increased tremendously.
Yeah. So maybe perhaps we could just kind of pull up a screen share just so people can see what we're talking about. I guess it's a very visual thing while you're talking. So I think like the other thing I really like was the original pitch was like, it's kind of like a Figma for spreadsheets where you can kind of zoom in and out really nicely. And it can support, I don't know how many rows you support, but millions of rows. Yeah. It was nice.
Yeah, we support millions of rows. Of course, we want to bring the whole team together around data analysis. That's why we chose the spreadsheet interface. Everyone knows how to use spreadsheets. And so when users first come into our tool, it looks really familiar, right? You could see Quadratic here. It just looks like a spreadsheet. We want people to think, hey, I already know how to use this. I know how to get started. And then we have the left panel on the side, the AI chat that can help you orchestrate and do everything in the sheet.
So how do you usually demo?
Yeah, I think, everyone who starts with the spreadsheet is probably bringing in a data set. So I can drag and drop in a CSV.
Nice.
This is a small feature, but you can drop a CSV kind of wherever you want on the sheet. This was always something I felt was more annoying than it needed to be in other spreadsheet tools. And then we could start with a prompt. So help me visualize my revenue over time.
By the way, I'll say it, like you can't do this in Google Sheets. It's stupid. You can't even freaking drag and drop a CSV into Google Sheets. What the hell?
When we started, you couldn't even smoothly scroll in Google Sheets. It was quantized to the nearest cell for scrolling. All these like minor product interactions were just really bad in Google Sheets. In Quadratic, you can pinch and zoom. So if you have a trackpad, you can zoom out and you can look at very large data sets. You can zoom out very far.
I don't know why you would want to, but yes.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to zoom in and out and focus on whatever you're working on. You don't need to be able to zoom out and see, a million rows. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so you visualize revenue here for people who are listening on audio. I mean, so this is what I call vibe charting. You look at it, you type in some words and you're like, just get me something. You don't even really look at the columns and you can make a chart. You can do some edits. Like something I always do as a first transformation is like, give me the y-axis in log form instead of absolute numbers. And you can do that.
Let's do it.
for me, actually, yeah, go ahead with that one. But like for me, the thing that really sold me was I had a whole bunch of categories of different talks. I was analyzing my CFPs, and for me, like learning Matplotlib and doing like colors and positioning of the labels and axes and legends and stuff, I just never did it because obviously it's just like you can do everything. It's just like it's hard to do. But like because I can just ask for it now, I'm unlocked with like charting ability so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that Quadratic is building in terms of adding analysis to the sheet is it's building a method of analysis. So if I go in and change some number that was part of my original data set, everything that it built is going to update. It's not giving you a static image output or anything like that. These are interactive charts that are based on the input data. So as that data changes, you can see how it reflects in your tool. And so a lot of our users are using Quadratic to model stuff, to build models to better understand data. Drop a CSV in ChatGPT and ask it for a chart. Those aren't responsive. Those aren't interactive. And those, I don't think ultimately help people understand data better.
And from a product perspective, should people still think about it as traditional spreadsheet, so I could do traditional formulas in there as well? Or like, is it just kind of like a spreadsheet like UX on top of a Python runtime and the AI?
Yeah, some of the core interaction methods in Quadratic. So if you press equals, you can use formulas. We have similar formula set to Excel and Google Sheets. And then if you press slash, you can go in and code in Python. So that by default will open in a code editor in the right panel. And I can, for example, output some data to the sheet. So this is, I'm just counting to 9. And that will return natively as a table in the sheet. So you can mix and match formulas, Python, and even database queries. So I can go in here as well. I'm connected to a database, and we can browse the database schema so we can see the tables that are in there. And we can also chat with it. So I can say, show me teams that signed up in the last hour. And because it knows the context of the schema, it knows all the field names and table names to get that type of query right, and it will populate it on the sheet.
And all the Python is running in a WASM container inside the browser, or how does the magic happen?
Yeah. Everything in Quadratic is running in WebAssembly in the browser, and then the whole sheet is drawn in WebGL. We did this so you get these really fast response times when you're writing code. When I wrote that Python code and put it on the sheet, it happened in a tiny fraction of a second. This database query took 1 second, but a lot of that time was on the database. Actually drawing it and putting it on the sheet was very quick.
And I think it's Python and JavaScript. Does the JavaScript also run in WebAssembly, or does it execute in a normal JavaScript sandbox?
Yeah, we run JavaScript in a web worker. So in an isolated environment. Yeah. If you were to open up a JavaScript cell and
so much easier. Honestly, yeah, like so many people run Python in spreadsheets. They should just like have like Python web workers and let Chrome, if Chrome did that actually would cut a lot of work for people.
Yeah, and the way that we think about all these things is like natively putting them in the sheet, right? Like you could run some JavaScript in Google Apps Script, but it's a separate thing. It's kind of running off to the side. It's not a part of your sheet. In Quadratic, I could go and run Python, and I could fetch data from an external API, and that just becomes a native part of my sheet that I can then go and say build a formula on top of, or continue to do additional analysis with. And whenever I want fresh data, I can just rerun that API call. It's just a part of the sheet, right?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, there's just like a ton to go in on spreadsheets. Like, I always say the big 3 categories of business apps. It's docs, it's slides, and sheets, which obviously maps to Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel. And like sheets is the hardest one, right? Like I actually like the reason I did 9 rounds in my Google interviews. The last interview that I did was build a spreadsheet, and it was very, very tough. Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you that story, but
no, you didn't. Yeah, building a spreadsheet is very tough too, because people expect it to have all the features of Excel, right? And that's and all the bugs of Excel in some cases. Excel has all these bugs that people rely on, date bugs and formula bugs that are now features. They're now just the way that works. And when we set out to build this spreadsheet, we set out to create something a little bit different. So we wanted to make it as familiar as possible, but not fully compatible with Excel. You can't export a Quadratic sheet back into Excel. We have code and we have database queries that live in our sheet. You can always pull your data out, of course. You could select any area on the sheet and get a CSV or get another file, but you can't just go back into Excel because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. What's your date policy? If I type, 0 in a date field? Does it give me, January 1st, 1970 or something?
I think one of our engineers wrote a blog post recently on the difficulties of date parsing and in spreadsheets, or like the cursed nature of date parsing in spreadsheets.
Cool. Okay, so I think that's the spreadsheet component. I think it's very underrated, the amount of data connectors you have. Like, it connects to Postgres. What else? Like Flake, RDS.
Yeah, today we support MySQL, Microsoft Server, Snowflake, Postgres. We're adding a bunch more in the next couple of weeks. We're adding BigQuery, and we're adding easier support for connecting Neon and Superbase as well.
Yeah. So like in the data engineer world that I used to be in, this is the ultimate BI tool, right? Like, you connect to your database and you do an analytics on it in a spreadsheet. And like, I think there have been a few attempts at this, but like, obviously nothing this performant and flexible as like a full spreadsheet.
Yeah, and it's been amazing for our team to use Quadratic for all of our product analytics. So we pull our data around.
Wait, are you showing your real data? Is this okay? Is this okay to show?
I can show our real data. Yeah.
Okay.
We pull our data from from like Mixpanel, from Postgres, and from other sources, and we bring it all together into dashboards that we can all work on. And so it's amazing to see people on our team who are less technical work on these dashboards alongside our most technical developers. And collaborate on analysis, which is something that I think is just missing in other BI tools. They're either really technical and then non-technical people just press export to CSV, or you're using a really non-technical tool and then the technical folks don't want to engage with it.
Let's talk maybe a bit about AI and what the interface between the spreadsheet and AI is. I think everybody understands the one-to-one nature of, this is a data source, make a chart. How do people interact with like the chat interface from a whole spreadsheet level? Like, how do you think about creating context? How do people maybe can direct the AI to certain pieces? It's almost like you can, zoom in and out, you can put all these things, but then it's maybe becomes a curse at some point.
I think one of the core challenges with building an AI spreadsheet is giving the right context to the model and giving the model the right tools to take actions based on what the user's asking. And so we've come up with a pretty clever way of giving the AI a summary of the entire sheet and then the ability to access additional details as it needs it. So it can see all the different tables that are and all the different code cells that are anywhere in your document and knows where they're located. It can ask for more information if there's not enough included in the first piece of context, and can then use a bunch of different tool calls to do actions in the sheet. Our goal is to make it be able to see and do anything a user can do and way beyond. Obviously, it can see more than just what's in a little frame on the screen. I mean, it can take actions that don't really make sense as user actions. Like, I want to highlight all cells that start with D or something like that. That makes sense as a computer to go do, but as a user, there's no button for that, right? We want to give it all the actions a user can do because users ask it, hey, format that in bold or something. So it needs to be able to do something that a user would ask like that. But people also ask for things that they don't know how to do themselves. And the AI needs the tools to be able to do those on its own.
Awesome. What was your journey in sort of implementing the agents? Like, obviously, I think when the ChatGPT moment happened, like, everyone was like, okay, how do I, put this into my product? Where did you start? Where did you evolve? Did you run into any wrong forks in the road that people can learn from?
Yeah, we started as a code assistant agent. So we started with that little chat in the side that helps you rewrite database queries and rewrite code cells. And we found ourselves using that for all of our coding in the tool. And it felt like a very natural progression to bring it up another level and allow it to do a lot more things in the sheet. So it was gradual. It was really a pull from us and our own users where we're like, man, this is the primary way we're interacting with our data already. We need to make this do everything.
Is it a simple sort of agent loop? Are there any guardrails? Is there any fine tuning going on? Just anything around like the technical implementation?
Yeah. Can talk a little bit about how it works. It knows the context of your sheet. When it makes changes, it looks at the sheet after every change. So if it generates an error or something doesn't look right, it can react to that. And the agent loop will continue until it thinks that it's answered the user's question, We don't want it to go too far. We want the user to be able to sort of understand all the changes that it's making in a single block. And so it doesn't go on forever, or it shouldn't go on forever. We are working on fine-tuning a model. We think we can get the costs of inference way down and the quality and specific, AI working in a spreadsheet is not really what these models were trained to do, right? There's a lot of 2D positioning, code, errors, these like multi-dimensional overlaps of data on a spreadsheet. And the LLMs weren't really trained to do that from their core. So by adding examples of what good spreadsheets look like and how to do the analysis in a way that's helpful to the user does help it give better answers.
Yeah. I think like one of the interesting things that I see is like sometimes supplying too much information, because you could go the distance of like dumping the entire spreadsheet row by row, cell by cell into the context, and it might get distracted. So I think there needs to be something smart about like effectively just doing the schema of each table. But I've also seen it basically kind of just like peek at the data and understand the schema or understand what it is before it executes. I don't know. Like it's interesting, like that data problem.
Yeah, we tried to give it the whole sheet as the context initially, and it works really great when you're working on a really small sheet. And then if you drag and drop 100,000 rows of data in, first of all, it's going to be really expensive. Your request is going to cost multiple dollars, and it's a really bad response. It's too much in context. And so we've done a lot of work to summarize what's in the sheet, what data you can find where, and then we put that in context by default, and then it has a tool so it can continue to read more if it wants to understand more about the data, which is probably the tool call that you saw when it was like, hey, I want to understand the column names. And
that's very smart.
This data doesn't just include numbers, but there's some values that are a dash. So I have to handle that in my code or formula that I'm writing. It will only peek at those things when it thinks it needs them.
And so basically each of the subsets, it's almost like its own object, and then you can like semantically describe them in the context, and then the AI can pick from there. And this is all done without, you're not spending any time on vision, right? You're just kind of like through the API, you're able to describe everything and pass it back.
Yeah, and we do a little bit of vision when users are creating charts. We pass back an image of what the chart looks like to the AI, because a lot of times the user will describe visually the change that they want to the chart. They'll say something like, this doesn't look right, or make this prettier. And it has, for it to be able to answer that well and give the user what it wants, it has to see what the user's seeing.
The thought just occurred to me. Have you seen the Studio Ghibli version for charts?
No.
So there's, a lot of people, when image gen came out for GPT-4o, they started Ghibifying everything, but you can also Ghibify charts. And I think actually it's like very underrated for creating infographics. To me, that's like as a content creator, that's like the gold mine, that I can deliver good infographics, but like it looks distinctive, and it's not like a default Google Sheets chart thing that doesn't look anything interesting. So I would actually, my feature request is I would put like a little like, style this the way that my company styles it. And here's a demo. Let's say I work at Studio Ghibli. I would style this as a Studio Ghibli chart. But like really, like I think there's some alpha there for image generation. But I hear what you're saying in terms, go ahead.
And I've done that a bunch of times where I've taken charts in Quadratic where it kind of looks like more like a standard chart. It doesn't have a ton of styling with it. And I've taken it and dropped it into ChatGPT or something and said, hey, make this look better for a presentation. Put it in this style.
Oh, you've done that.
Remove this labels. Yeah. But I keep the chart in Quadratic because I can update it really easily, right? Once you've turned something into a static image, you can't update it. So I would just take the image and like put it in the model to do that.
Totally. Yeah, I think the other thing that I would say is interesting. So I don't know, have you seen the new Canva data grid thing that they did? So Canva launched the spreadsheet, which I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But they don't obviously execute code. And you can basically build the Canva features inside of Quadratic, because each cell can run code, and you can sort of drag and drop or map over a set of data to then call an API to then generate images. So you could actually kind of build that entire workflow within Quadratic.
Yeah, I think that Canva's spreadsheet and tools like Airtable and Smartsheet, they're really geared towards data storage and process management. Quadratic is really focused on analytics. And so our spreadsheet's really geared towards helping you transform and visualize and understand data. And yeah, you can augment cells with data using API calls and AI as well. And so I think that they're maybe more geared towards that type of thing where they're augmenting sales data or augmenting marketing data.
Do you see the spreadsheet as being more of a proactive UX that the AI uses to communicate to you. I think I think the use case of like I ask AI to do something in the spreadsheet is clear. I think there's maybe the future of like, hey, the spreadsheet is proactively doing some analysis for you because maybe some data looks off or, whatever, it's like the right time of the year. You see Quadratic almost as like a tool that even other agents might build on in the future. Like I know Anthropic, for example, did the example of like a financial research agent today at Dev Day. You could see that agent then using Quadratic to like put some of the data and model in a spreadsheet so that you could use it. I'm curious if you've given it any thought.
Yeah, I think that the spreadsheet is the best interface for a human working with a computer to understand data. So if a user goes into an AI model and asks, help me understand what home I can afford, or something like that, the user is going to want to change different variables. What interest rate do I have? What's my monthly payment look like? They want to play with and change a bunch of different variables and see how it affects the output and trust that the calculations were done in a way where it's correct. I think that the best, most comfortable interface for working with that type of thing for the vast majority of people is a spreadsheet. And so I do see these agents generating spreadsheets to answer people's questions, particularly when they focus around the user understanding data. Of course, it can give you a number, right? But does that really help you understand better? And do you trust it?
Yeah. I think that auditability is important. Any other use cases that we haven't talked about that typically is highlighting? We haven't talked about multiplayer, and that was a big sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quadratic has real-time multiplayer. A lot of our users are bringing in their data and chatting with it. That's the primary use case. They want to do analysis fast, probably very similar to your use case where they just don't want to mess around with formulas and buttons. They just want to get to the result really quickly.
Yeah. But like, just like generally, what are you seeing? What's going viral in terms of like, I think you're exploring different ways to explain the product to maybe a less technical audience because of the AI push, right?
Yeah, we see a lot of like business owners and business managers who work at small companies with just a few people that bring in data. I think they often don't have time to mess around in Excel, and they see AI as like, oh, AI is going to help me do this really quickly.
I think one thing that occurred to me that I don't think I see in Quadratic yet, but I'm curious on your thoughts, is kind of, let's call it form controls. Does that word mean anything to you? Effectively buttons and like little form elements that you can kind of turn the spreadsheet into more of an app where it doesn't reactively update every time a number is changed. You're kind of changing the data flow paradigm from like numbers have changed, you recalculate everything. That's a spreadsheet, right? To more of a like we'll enter in some things, but like it's more of like a user input environment that then starts the recalculations whenever you're done.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to make it clearer what inputs you can change. Or are some of those inputs not just boxes with text in them? Could you have a slider or some other types of inputs that then can recalculate models and affect them? Absolutely, that makes sense.
Sliders, yeah. I mean, basically anything in the HTML form spec it's fair game. It's almost kind of like the roadmap is like done for you in terms of like what you can do. So I happen to know that your team is pretty small. It's like 6-7 people.
We're 9 people now. We're a little bigger, but yeah.
So how do you do this with 9 people? This is like a very broad, like it's a remote team, 9 people. You hired my friend Jim Nielsen, who I have to shout out as like one of the best React developers that I know, and he's over in Japan. Like, how do you run a remote, company that's what I've been calling also a tiny team? Like it's you're doing a lot with very little.
Yeah, Jim was our first employee, and we've been laser focused on hiring people who are obsessed about solving the problem that they're working on, who are self-motivated to solve a difficult problem over a long period of time. I think that's really important for a remote team. About half of us are here in Colorado and the other half are remote. So and a lot of our engineers are remote, and they're all very self-driven. Like they wake up just thinking about the next problem within the spreadsheet and like obsessed with solving it. And I think that that's critical for running a remote team, building something really difficult.
Yeah. How important is it to you to be like, you're not 100% open source, right? Your source available, but like, does a lot of feature requests come from there? Does the community contribute a lot? Do they need a lot of grooming?
We found a lot of our developers through being open source. And I think in that way, that's been incredibly valuable to us. And it also goes a long way in building trust with customers who care a lot about trust, bigger corporations, companies who are working with more sensitive data. You can self-host Quadratic. We're source available on GitHub. And building trust to put your data in a tool is difficult. And I think us being open in that way really helps.
Awesome. Any kind of like future of data analysis and AI things, I feel like this is almost like, fitting the old UX and putting AI on top of it. Any hot takes?
I continue to believe that the spreadsheet interface is the best interface for humans understanding data, working with computers. And so I think what will change is a lot of the buttons will go away and the way that you interact with it is going to become much easier and simpler. You can say, make my document beautiful. You don't have to click a million buttons to make that happen. But users will still want to be able to click on a number and understand where it came from to get that confidence in it that it is the number that they expect it to be. So I see our agents getting more proactive as you add data and as you start to do things in the sheet, continuing that work and making it a lot faster. But we're really building this tool that works with you to understand data. Like we want the human in the loop at every stage. We don't want to set it off and then come back a day later and have something done. That's like receiving a spreadsheet from a coworker or something. It's like, okay, now I have to try to understand this all over again. I think the process of building a method of analysis alongside the tool is really what helps people understand data. And I think that's why they turn to spreadsheets in the first place, so they can get an understanding of the data so they can make a better decision.
Yeah. Do you think that will be mostly Python once the model does most of the analysis, or what's the kind of like the future of formulas, I guess?
I think formulas will be used less in favor of Python, yes. If you're summing a column, a formula is great. If you're trying to aggregate data, like how many users signed up last week and did this thing, formulas are a mess. And they're super, if you had a complex query, imagine reading the formula that the AI generated. It does not help you understand what it's doing. And so I think a lot of the analysis will go to Python over time.
So as the resident JavaScript guy, why not JavaScript? Do you have a split between Python and JavaScript right now? Is it like 75-25?
I don't know the split right now. It used to be like 90-10, but I haven't checked in a couple of months. Python's much more used in the data science world, right? There's a lot more tooling around Python to work with data.
I mean, Pandas is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, we support Pandas natively, and that is a big part of why it works so well. JavaScript is pretty immature in terms of working with data. It doesn't have a lot of packages or tooling around transforming and working with data. There's a lot of good visualization libraries, though, which we support. If you want to create charts using JavaScript libraries, you can do that to Quadratic.
Yeah, one of the things I'm interested in exploring is like data analysis in Python, but visualization and UI in JavaScript, right? So it's kind of like a mullet or a chimera of languages. And you can support that because the different cells, like data is like the universal interface that you pass between languages, and you can do each stage in whatever language you choose.
Yeah, you could query data in a database, transform it with Python, and visualize it using JavaScript libraries and 3 separate cells right next to each other.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. I think that's all that we prepped in terms of just talking about it. Any other things you want to mention or calls to action?
Yeah, sign up, go to Quadratic AI and try it out. If you want to use AI to understand data, Quadratic is free and we charge after a certain amount of AI usage. And so, yeah, if you want to use AI to better understand your data, check out Quadratic AI. Thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for joining us, David.